On a cold March night in 1964, a young woman was murdered in full view of her neighbors. 38 people watched. 38 people heard her screams. And 38 people did absolutely nothing. But the most disturbing part isn't that it happened. It's that it keeps happening. And it's that under the right circumstances, you would do the same thing. Kitty Genovese was 28 years old when she died on the pavement outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. It was just after 3 in the morning. She had finished her shift managing a bar and was walking the short distance from her car to her front door when a man appeared behind her. What followed lasted over half an hour. The attack was brutal, prolonged, and loud. Kitty screamed for help. Her voice carried through the courtyard, bouncing off brick walls, rising through the cold air into dozens of open windows. Lights flickered on, curtains moved, faces appeared in the darkness behind glass. And then, one by one, the lights went out again. The man came back twice. He stabbed her. He assaulted her. He left her dying in a hallway. When the police finally arrived, Kitty Genovese was dead. And when investigators interviewed the residents of those apartments, they discovered something that would change psychology forever. 38 people had seen or heard the attack. Not one of them called the police until it was over. The case became a symbol. Newspapers ran with the story. Editorials condemned the moral decay of urban America. Preachers used it as evidence of a society that had lost its soul. But 2 psychologists read the reports and asked a different question. They didn't ask why these people were monsters. They asked why these people were normal. John Darley and Bib Lataine saw in the Kitty Genovese case not an aberration, but a pattern. They suspected that the very everyone assumed would guarantee help, the presence of many witnesses, might actually be the reason no help came. They called it the bystander effect, and they set out to prove that any of us, under the right conditions, would walk past someone in desperate need. Their first experiment was simple and devastating. They invited college students to participate in what they were told was a discussion about personal problems faced by students in high-pressure academic environments. Each participant sat alone in a room with an intercom. They were told that to preserve anonymity, the discussion would happen over the intercom system, with each person taking turns speaking while the others listened. The conversations were staggered so that only one microphone was active at a time. What the participants didn't know was that everyone else in the discussion was a recording. There were no other students, just the participant alone in a room, listening to voices. And then, a few minutes into the discussion, one of the recorded voices began to have a seizure. The voice stammered. It grew panicked. It choked. It called out for help. And then it went silent. Darley and Lataine varied one factor. In some sessions, participants believed they were the only other person in the discussion. In others, they believed there was one additional listener. In still others, they believed there were 4 other people hearing the same emergency. The results were stark. When participants believed they were alone with a victim, 85% of them left their room to get help within the first minute. But when they believed there were 4 other witnesses, only 31% responded at all. And those who did respond took more than 3 times as long to act. The presence of others didn't increase the chance of help. It suffocated it. The researchers identified something they called diffusion of responsibility. When you are alone with someone in crisis, the responsibility to act falls entirely on you. There is no ambiguity. There is no escape. You are the only one who can help, and if you do nothing, the consequences are yours to bear. But when others are present, that clarity dissolves. Responsibility spreads out among the crowd like a stain in water, so diluted that no single person feels compelled to act. Each individual thinks someone else will intervene, Each person assumes someone else is more qualified, more certain, more willing, and so everyone waits. And in that waiting, people D. But diffusion of responsibility is only one piece of the mechanism. The bystander effect operates through multiple psychological channels, each reinforcing the others, each perfectly ordinary, and each capable of overriding our conscious intentions to be good. The second factor is pluralistic ignorance. Emergencies are often ambiguous. A person lying on the sidewalk could be drunk, exhausted, or in diabetic shock. A raised voice could be an argument, a performance, or an assault. A woman screaming could be joking with friends or fighting for her life. We rely on social cues to interpret reality, and in the presence of others, we look to them for guidance. If no one else seems alarmed, we assume there is no alarm to be had. We take the calm of others as evidence that our concern is overblown, that we are misreading the situation, that intervention would be inappropriate or embarrassing. The cruel irony is that everyone in the crowd is doing the same thing. Each person is looking at the others for confirmation. Each person sees a room full of calm faces and interprets that calm as knowledge rather than paralysis. No one acts because no one else is acting, and the longer the group remains passive, the stronger signal becomes that passivity is correct. What begins as uncertainty calcifies into consensus. The group agrees, without speaking, that nothing is wrong. This is why emergencies in crowded places are often met with eerie stillness, not because the crowd is full of sociopaths, but because each individual is waiting for permission from others to acknowledge what they already suspect. The third mechanism is evaluation apprehension. We are social creatures, and we are terrified of judgment. When we are alone, we act according to our own assessment of the situation. But in public, we perform. We become acutely aware that our actions will be witnessed, interpreted, and evaluated by others. This awareness creates hesitation. What if I'm wrong? What if this isn't actually an emergency? What if I call for help and the person stands up and laughs? What if I make a scene and everyone thinks I'm overreacting? The fear of social embarrassment is not trivial. It is ancient and powerful. For most of human history, being cast out of the group meant death. Our brains are wired to avoid behaviors that risk humiliation or exclusion. And so, when faced with ambiguity, we choose inaction. We choose the safety of blending in over the risk of standing out, even when someone's life may depend on it. These forces, diffusion of responsibility, pluralistic ignorance, and evaluation apprehension, work together to create a perfect storm of inaction, and they do so without malice. The people who stood at their windows and watched Kitty Genovese die were not evil. They were ordinary. They were experiencing the same cognitive processes that govern all of us in moments of uncertainty. They were influenced by the presence of others in ways they could not consciously detect. And when later asked why they did nothing, many of them could not provide a satisfying answer. They said they thought someone else had called. They said they didn't want to get involved. They said they weren't sure what they were seeing. These are not confessions of cruelty. They're descriptions of how the bystander effect feels from the inside. Like nothing at all. Darley and Latain conducted more experiments to isolate these variables. In one study, they had a Confederate pretend to faint in a subway car. When the car was crowded, help came slower. In another, they staged a theft in plain view of participants. When others were present, intervention dropped dramatically. They filled a room with smoke while participants completed questionnaires. When alone, 75% of participants reported the smoke within 2 minutes. When in groups of 3, where the other 2 were Confederates instructed to ignore the smoke, only 10% of real participants reported it. even as the room became so thick with smoke they could barely see. They sat there, waving smoke away from their faces, coughing, but unwilling to disrupt the calm of the group. The implications of this research extend far beyond individual emergencies. The bystander effect helps explain why abuses of power persist in organizations, why harassment continues in workplaces, why entire communities can know that something terrible is happening and yet no one intervenes. The mechanisms that prevent us from helping a stranger on the street are the same mechanisms that prevent employees from reporting misconduct, that prevent neighbors from calling protective services, that prevent witnesses to injustice from speaking out, In each case, the presence of others creates a diffusion of responsibility. In each case, the inaction of the group signals that intervention is unnecessary or unwelcome. In each case, individuals choose the comfort of conformity over the risk of standing alone. And the effect is not limited to passive observation. It extends to digital spaces. Social media has created an environment where millions of people can witness harm in real time. A video of violence goes viral. A cry for help spreads across platforms. And the response, more often than not, is a sea of likes, shares, and comments that substitute for action. Each person who engages with the content feels they have done something. They have acknowledged the problem. They have expressed concern. But acknowledgement is not intervention. And the presence of so many other viewers creates the same diffusion of responsibility. That occurred in that apartment courtyard in Queens. Someone else will call the authorities. Someone else will check on the person. Someone else will do something real. The crowd grows larger, and the likelihood of meaningful help grows smaller. The research also reveals that certain factors can counteract the bystander effect. When individuals are made to feel personally responsible, they act. When a victim makes direct eye contact and singles out a specific person, intervention increases. When clear instructions are given, when someone shouts, "You in the blue jacket, call 911", people respond. The antidote to diffusion is specificity. The antidote to pluralistic ignorance is decisive action by even one person. A single individual who breaks the spell of inaction gives others permission to act. This is why leadership in a crisis is so vital. Not because leaders are braver or more moral, but because they absorb the ambiguity. They make a decision, and in doing so, they clarify the situation for everyone else. But relying on the spontaneous emergence of a leader in every crisis is not a solution. It is a hope, and hope is not a mechanism. The real lesson of the bystander effect is that good intentions are not enough. Being a good person is not enough. Believing you would help is not enough. The forces that generate inaction are largely invisible to us. They operate beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. They hijack our decision-making before we realize a decision is being made. This is why so many of the people who did nothing to help Kitty Genovese were genuinely shocked when confronted with their inaction. They did not see themselves as complicit. They saw themselves as witnesses. And in their own minds, witnesses are not responsible. The case of Kitty Genovese has been re-examined in the decades since her death. Historians and journalists have pointed out that the original reports were sensationalized. The number 38 was likely inflated. Some witnesses did call the police, though not immediately. Some could not see clearly what was happening. The story, as it was told, was not entirely accurate, but the psychological phenomenon it revealed was real. The bystander effect has been replicated in hundreds of studies across cultures, contexts, and populations. It is not an artifact of one night in Queens. It is a feature of human cognition, and it is active in us right now. You have walked past someone who needed help. Maybe you told yourself they were fine. Maybe you told yourself someone else would check. Maybe you told yourself it wasn't your place. And maybe you were right. But maybe you were experiencing diffusion of responsibility. Maybe you were caught in pluralistic ignorance. Maybe you were paralyzed by evaluation apprehension. And the most unsettling part is that you will never know which it was. Because the bystander effect does not announce itself. It feels like reason. The next time you see someone in distress and no one is helping, do not assume it's because no one cares. Assume it's because everyone is waiting for someone else to be first, and then be first. If this video made you think differently about the moments when you chose not to act, leave a comment and share what you'll do next time. Subscribe for more explorations of the psychology that shapes our behavior in ways we don't see. And if you want to go deeper, check out the next video in this series, because the forces that control us in a crowd are only the beginning.